Okay, I have not been to Minnesota in probably 20 years.
Bring your ass.
The Western Conference Finals matchup between the Timberwolves and the Mavericks could give us the next face of the NBA. When looking at these two teams, we are going to get a series that could feed us for generations. This could go down as one of the best matchups that we've seen because of how these two teams play. We're going to have Ant versus Luka. When we look at the Timberwolves, they have stars at the center positions, like Karl Anthony Towns, like Rudy Gobert. And when we look at the opposite side, the Mavericks, Kyrie Irving on the other side of Luka Doncic, and players that have stepped up into that third player role like PJ Washington, like Derrick Jones Jr. This is going to be a fantastic series, and I think it's very unpredictable because we've seen throughout both of these teams in the series that they definitely have holes on their team. Minnesota going all the way to Game 7, at one point almost down by 20 points in Game 7, but they did find a way to come back. But the average win margin in that series with the Minnesota and Denver series, it was almost a blowout every single game. But the Mavericks, on the other end, winning in 6 games, they got the job done against the number 1 seed in the West. Kyrie Irving and Luka versus Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert. Let's dive a little deeper into this as we could see the potential face of the NBA come out of this series. Now let's start at the top. Anthony Edwards for the Timberwolves. One of the youngest players in the league still at only 22 years old, and he's putting up 28.9, 6.2 rebounds, and 5.9 assists in his 11 games so far in the playoffs. Despite his last game not being a good performance for him, he's still shooting 50% from the field and 40% from 3. Now on the other side, we got Luka Doncic, who's averaging 27.3 points, 9.7 rebounds, and 9.1 assists. He hasn't been shooting that well in the playoffs, surprisingly, at only 42% from the field and 30% from 3, but he's still putting up good numbers because of his shot attempts overall, and he's been able in that last series to will his team through there, putting up multiple triple-doubles in that last series. Next, let's move on to the defense. Now, the Timberwolves have the 4th best defensive rating in the playoffs so far, but the Mavericks are pretty close behind them at 6th. Now, if we look at the defensive rebounds, Timberwolves edge them out on that. They edge them on the defensive rebound percentage, more steals, but less blocks per game. Dallas has been able to clog the rim very effectively with guys like Dereck Lively going out there and getting fantastic blocks under the rim. Now, Cat and Rudy Gobert, obviously two of the best players at their position right now. Rudy Gobert may not be the best offensive player, but when we look at him in the playoffs right now, defensively, he is the defensive player of the year and a 4-time winner at that. He may not be able to go out there and give them 20 points offensively, but defensively, he can go out there, and the matchup, potentially him against Dereck Lively, depending on if we see him guard on the defense with Cat out there, we'll probably see him and Dereck Lively go at it, so they'll kind of cancel each other out, I would assume. But a guy that's only putting up 14 points per game, he's going out there defensively and getting 2 blocks a game, so obviously makes it up there. And Cat is a guy that could easily give them 30 points a game, maybe not every game during the series, but he's a guy that can give them 30 points when they need it. Now, the next angle that we have to look at it is the bench. Now, despite the Timberwolves playing less games than the Mavericks do have more points overall on their bench in this playoffs, but the Timberwolves are averaging more, but it's pretty close. Timberwolves have played 11 games so far in the playoffs, and they're averaging 25.1 points coming off of their bench, while the Mavericks have played 12 and are averaging 24.5. And when we look at the leading scorers off the bench for both of these teams, for the Mavericks, it gets a little murky because obviously they do have a mix of Daniel Gafford and Dereck Lively, depending on who starts at that center position. But outside of that, Maxi Kleber hasn't played a lot. He's been injured, but Josh Green has come in putting in 5 points a game. Tim Hardaway is putting up 5.8. And like I mentioned before, the mix between Gafford and Dereck Lively. But when we look at Minnesota, Naz Reid coming off of the bench, 10 points. He has been fantastic for them. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been fantastic for them as well. So I think the main thing to look at when these bench units come in, it really does depend on how the Mavericks pursue that offensive matchup, depending on if they want Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford out there, depending on who guards who at this point. PJ Washington out there as well at the power forward. A little bit of a smaller lineup, obviously, for the Mavericks when they're going up against Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, but we'll have to see who starts in this series because as of right now, both of those guys, Lively getting 21 minutes per game, Daniel Gafford getting 20.8 minutes per game, so it's going to be very close. Gafford has started all of the games in the playoffs so far, but Lively's averaging more minutes, so we're going to have to see what happens in this setting because honestly, when we're looking at the stats, 8.6 points per game for Gafford, 8.3 from Derek Lively. Derek Lively, they've been able to go out there and hack him, but when he's gone to the free throw line, he's gone and made most of them, and he's done a fantastic job so far in the playoffs, especially when he's getting hacked in all these games, shooting 61% from the field. He's been great so far. So who are my X factors in this series? It really boils down to one player on each side, and it's going to be the third option. Right now for the Mavericks, PJ Washington has been that third option, and in that last series, he came out and had some fantastic games against Oklahoma City. In the beginning of the series, Game 2 putting up 29, Game 3 putting up 27, Game 4 putting up 21. He was fantastic in some of those outings and shooting just fantastic from deep. 63.6% in Game 2, 41% from 3, and 45% in Game 4, 40% in Game 6, only 9 points in that game, but still went out and got rebounds. 10 rebounds and 10 points, a double-double in Game 5. 12 rebounds and 21 points in Game 4. 29 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists in Game 2. If he can go out there and be a productive third option like that and put up 15, 18 plus points per game and get nearly double-digit rebounds every time, with Luka going out there and he's going to get 10 plus rebounds every game, it seems like at this point, he is my X factor for the Mavericks, because if he's on and he's shooting like that, it's going to be very hard to stop. But on the other end, when we look at a guy, we're going to look at Jaden McDaniels for Minnesota, who has been fantastic defensively as well, and in his past 2 games against Denver, putting up 23 points, shooting 75% from 3 and 60% from 3, putting up 21 points in Game 6. There were some games where he struggled a little bit. He shot 0%. He did not make a single 3 in Game 3 of this series. Shot 33% and then 25% in Game 4 and Game 5. So on both of these ends, I'm looking at those wing players because Kyrie and Luka, we've seen them play pretty similarly throughout these whole series, where Luka comes in and he makes the shots when he needs to in the beginning of the half and gets some good stats, and then Kyrie kind of steps it up in the second half, pulls out that clutch gene. Obviously Luka can do that as well, but the way that I've been watching this series, it just seems like Luka's not completely healthy and not there all the time for every possession, but he has a long list of injury right now, but it seems like he's going out there still putting up 30-point triple-doubles every game, so we'll have to see how he kind of heals and plays throughout this series. But when we talk about the point guard on the other side, Mike Conley and Anthony Edwards, I'm taking Kyrie Irving over Mike Conley. Obviously, at this point, I don't think that's very much of a hot take. Anthony Edwards and Luka, I would still take Luka over him. Ant, though, I think could easily outperform Luka in some of these games if Luka struggles, like we have seen him from deep, and he's going to bring that intensity. But when we talk about the bigs, obviously, I'm going to take Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert over whoever it ends up being for the Mavericks. We're going to have to see. I mean, if they continue to go with Daniel Gafford, which they have so far, I'm taking him, taking Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert over Gafford and Derek Lively or whoever else that starts in that center position. But that's why I boil it down to the wings in this series. Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington, it's going to be very big for them to step up. If you're a Mavericks fan, you got to watch out for those two guys, because if they can step up, at least one of them each game, specifically looking at PJ Washington as well, if he can step up, he's going to be fantastic, and the Mavericks could go out there and win this game. But if we're on the opposite side and we look at Jaden McDaniels, if he can lock those guys up, it's going to be very tough for the Mavericks to come out on top, just because the edge defensively does go to the Timberwolves. So maybe the Mavericks put up more shots, they get more opportunities, but defensively at the rim, it's going to be hard for them to score. So let me know down below who you guys think is going to win this series. Luka Doncic at 25 years old, looking to make the finals for the first time in his career. On the opposite end, Anthony Edwards at 22 years old, looking to make the finals for the first time in his career. And on the opposite side, they would meet a young Jason Tatum or a young Tyrese Halliburton in the finals. So we could easily see a new face of the league after this season. But for now, let me know who you guys think is going to win in the Western Conference Finals. And hopefully we get a fantastic series. So make sure to tune into that, and make sure to tune into the next video. Let me know what you guys want to see down below, and I'll see you in that one.